So the other day, I went with my brother to take my nephew Cooper to see the new Looney Tunes movie. "The Day the Earth Blew Up" is the title of it. And yeah, I don't know. I just thought I would do a video here, giving my thoughts. Essentially, a review of the movie, just like I did recently with the Plankton movie that just came out on Netflix. So yeah, with that said, before we really get into it, just to give some background information on the movie and I guess why I wanted to go see it. So this is the first like hand drawn 2D animated feature film to hit theaters in probably around like 15 years or something like that, with the exception of like there might be some anime from Japan that gets like a limited release over here in the States or something like that at some theaters. But as far as like an actual like Western, like American produced animated movie, very seldom do you see those in theaters anymore because everything nowadays is CG. You look at Frozen or Toy Story or any number of other movies. One other exception, but that was kind of partially CG and also partially live action. You had like I think it was like the second SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, I think the name of it was. And most of that movie took place, they're in Bikini Bottom and it's all like traditionally animated. But you wouldn't know that from the marketing though, because they marketed that pretty much exclusively showing like the second half, maybe even like the third act of the movie, where they're on land and it's live action mixed with CG, and they have like these superhero personas that they transform into. But yeah, it's like they really didn't want you to know that this was a mostly hand drawn movie. Because for the longest time, I think, Hollywood has been scared of 2D animated movies because they think it's not going to, sell tickets. It's not going to get butts in seats. That's on top of the fact that, hand drawn animation is, more costly. It's more expensive to do it that way. And, it's more, more time consuming when you're drawing out those frames versus if you've got a 3D model that you can rig and just manipulate the appendages as needed. I will say in recent years, CG has gotten a lot better to the point where I'm not as bothered by the fact that it's kind of replaced 2D animation. Used to, it was a huge frustration of mine. But more recent movies, like, for example, DreamWorks' The Bad Guys, looks gorgeous. They do all these like squash and stretch animation techniques that really make it look as if it were hand drawn, but it's CG, but it looks really, really nice. Similarly, you have the last SpongeBob movie that was supposed to get a theatrical release, which was Sponge on the Run, I think was the name of that one, where SpongeBob's trying to find Gary, and he's in like Atlantis, I think it was. That movie I thought looked gorgeous. Like it is one of the most beautiful animated movies I've ever seen. And again, it's really dynamic with that squash and stretch animation where it's not just a character model being manipulated. They express in way the eyes get large, or like all this different stuff that makes it look as if it were hand drawn. It just adds a whole new life to it that I'm not used to seeing in CG animation. I've always just thought CG felt a lot more flat and soulless, but we are getting to a point where the technology has gotten better to where like I'm starting to be a fan of CG animated movies. But that said, I have always really longed to return to the days, because I think some of the prettiest animated movies ever are some of the ones that we got in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was kind of the peak of 2D animation before it just completely, died out. I'm talking stuff like DreamWorks' The Prince of Egypt. Like, holy cow, is that movie incredible. It's got scenes animated by James Baxter, who's like this legendary animator who does all these like really fluid animations. Like he animated the scene where Moses like reaches into the burning bush and like his hand's not burning, and he like rotates his hand in a way that's like really hard to animate. But it looks so good. And then a couple years later, DreamWorks put out The Road to El Dorado, which just looks gorgeous. There's this one particular shot where like there's this waterfall, because they're in kind of this sort of Aztec slash Mayan inspired place, I guess. And there's like this waterfall and this kind of tropical rainforest, and it's got like a rainbow in front of it, you know, because they essentially find paradise, and it looks so gorgeous, you know, like it really looks like a place where you want to live. Um, so I've spent a lot of time talking about about 2D versus 3D animation, and I've not even really got into the Looney Tunes movie yet. But you know, the case in point, I wasn't sure going in whether or not I would like this movie. Based on the trailers, I was kind of iffy about it. I was like, it seems a little too goofy, a little too nonsensical. I'm not sure if I'm really jiving with this whole like aliens from outer space plot. It seems just a little too zany. And then some of the stuff they would show in the marketing of just like, you know, there's a scene where like Daffy's like twerking and stuff, and it's just like, you know, because you've got a lot of modern movies like, you know, there's a new Smurfs movie coming out where it's like, oh, there's influencer Smurf and he's got his phone and he's, you know, and it's like just these movies that try so hard to pander to young audiences but just completely miss the mark. You know, and you look at the backlash to the recent Shrek 5 teaser that really kind of leans into like the memes and stuff, you know. But so I was a little iffy about that going into this movie, but I was like, I have to see this movie. I want to support it. I want this movie to do well in the box office because I want to get more traditional 2D hand drawn animated movies like this. Will that happen? Probably not, because frankly, Warner Brothers has done a pretty crappy job marketing this movie. I don't think a lot of people, unless you're like really in the know and just like are a huge animation buff like me, probably a good chance that you don't even know this movie exists. Because like I've not seen really anything in the ways of like advertisements, you know, marketing for this movie. And you know, to top that off, Warner Brothers just like a couple of years ago, there was like this big controversy where they were supposed to be coming out with like they completely finished this movie. It was called Acme versus Wile E. Coyote, I think. And yeah, they completely finished this Looney Tunes movie starring Wile E. Coyote. And then Warner Brothers just decided, yeah, we're going to shelve it. That way we can get a tax write-off. So the movie never released. People were understandably really upset about that. You still got people petitioning with like saying, you know, save save Wile E. Coyote versus Acme. So, you know, it's kind of a miracle that this movie even came out at all. But it's like, if you have so little confidence in it that you don't think that it's going to succeed, so you're not going to give it a marketing budget, why greenlight it to be made in the first place? I don't understand. It's like you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Either don't make it or make it and make sure that you're properly advertising it. So I don't know. It's like they just kind of threw it out there to the wolves. And unfortunately, that was kind of reflected by my experience at the movie theater. We got there. You know, we got there a few minutes early. Early, they were still playing previews and everything, but we were the only ones in the cinema. And then, right like a minute or two before the movie started, a guy comes in, like a dad, I guess, with his daughter. That was the only people in the whole cinema. It was just me, my brother, and my nephew Cooper, and then those two. So those just two sets of family were there, 5 people in total. That's not good. So I'm really kind of worried about the success of this movie because it's putting aside the quality of the movie itself. I just really want to see more 2D hand drawn movies like this, and I'm very happy that we got one finally after all these years. Pretty much the first since like I think in 2010 Disney put out like I think they put out a Winnie the Pooh movie that year, and they also put out the Princess and the Frog, which I think is good. I think that's an underrated Disney movie. Not necessarily my favorite, but I thought it was good. But I guess it didn't meet Disney's you know, expectations in the box office or whatever, especially compared to it might have been the same year that like Tangled came out, if I'm not mistaken. And you know, Tangled ended up being hugely successful, and then you had Frozen a few years later, which just did gangbusters, and the rest was history. 2D animation was just kaput. But yeah, I've spent like 10 minutes here just kind of giving that whole preface. So let's get into the movie itself. And do keep in mind there are going to be spoilers in this. So if you haven't already seen the movie but you intend to, then you know you might want to click off this video. I would encourage you to come back after you have seen it, because you know kind of hurts the algorithm, to be honest, if somebody clicks on the video and then doesn't finish it. So maybe go watch it, and then if you want to, come back and finish the video and tell me if you agreed with my thoughts, or let me know in the comments if you think I'm way off base. But yeah, so getting into the actual movie itself, and it's interesting. Some of my fears going into it, I would say, did kind of come to fruition. There's some movies, and the same way with video games and stuff, where it's like I see a trailer, and it's like I kind of know, like, intrinsically whether or not it's going to be for me, like what I'm going to think of it. And that's kind of how I think it went with the Looney Tunes movie, where I went into it, I watched it, and it was like, yeah, that more or less kind of met my expectations, which weren't super high. They weren't like super low, but they weren't super high either. So I guess I thought this was kind of a middle of the road movie. That just for me personally. And we'll get into the reasons why. To talk about some things that I really liked about the movie, though, I would say the best part of this movie was probably the first 15 to 20 minutes, where the stakes are kind of lower and it's a little bit more of a down-to-earth plot. So you've got Daffy and Porky, and they're, living together. They have this kind of weird opening exposition bit where you see Daffy and Porky, and they're just kind of, I guess, just kind of like lost out in the wilderness as like babies. They don't really explain it very much. So I don't know if they're orphans. I don't know what the deal is. But they get taken in by this guy named Farmer Jim, who essentially raises them. So you have this little montage of them, growing up from children to teenagers, and then they're adults. And then Farmer Jim, I guess, dies. It's really weird. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. It's like they try to make it dramatic, where it's like they're crying like, Farmer Jim, no, and he's like, you boys be good, and then he kind of just disappears into the sunset. Like, literally, he just kind of just floats away into the sky. And it's like, I guess he died, but it's like it's not really clear. But they play it kind of for laughs. It's like that could have been kind of a heavy moment, but like even the way Farmer Jim is animated, they kind of do this thing. It's almost like something out of Ren and Stimpy or something. It was very weird and a little off-putting, where it's like they make him like he's drawn, but he's drawn like super detailed, like to where he stands out from the whole rest of the movie. Like nothing else is like as detailed as he is, but he's not really like animated, and like only his mouth moves, and everything else is just completely like rigid and static. And then when he goes away, it's kind of just like this thing where it's just like he's here, and then it's like that like it's very like choppy, but it's done that way on purpose. Like he doesn't move his arms or his legs or anything, and so it's really jarring and out of place. But they do that for comedic effect. But for me personally, I don't know if it really worked, because again, it's like I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling during this scene. It's like Porky and Daffy are obviously devastated because the person who raised them from childhood is going away forever, and they're crying. But it's like you're doing it in this way that's like you're trying so hard to make it funny, and it's like I'm not finding this sad, and I'm not finding it funny either. I'm just emotionally confused watching this scene, watching this father figure die in the most goofy way possible. I don't know how else to describe it. It kind of puts in the mind like Shrek 3, for example, when like Fiona's dad is croaking literally and figuratively, and how that should be a sad moment, but they kind of play it for laughs. And I do think that it is funny in Shrek 3, although a lot of people would say the king was such a good character who had such a good arc in the second movie that he deserved better, that he shouldn't have gone out in such a comedic way. And I get that. I understand that. But I do think that the scene was at least funny, whereas the stuff with Farmer Jim that they set up at the very start, it's like it's not sad, and it's not really funny either. I'm just kind of like, what? It's just kind of random for the sake of being random. So I wasn't crazy about that. But after that first couple minutes of exposition with Farmer Jim raising him, and then he dies, from there on for the next like 15 or so minutes, I would say the movie's really solid. That's where the movie really hits its stride. And so Porky and Daffy are essentially, they have like this really rude and very busty lady from the homeowners association who shows up and is basically telling them that they have to, their house is basically a wreck, and if they don't, straighten, if they don't cobble the money together to get the necessary repairs that their home needs, that essentially they'll be uh, evicted. I guess I don't. They won't be able to live there anymore on that block, so they'll be homeless. And so not only is this their only place they have to live, but they also have a lot of sentimental value attached to it because Farmer Jim, raised them there. That's all that they know is that one house. So I think that's good. So from there, they start looking for a job. The stakes are lower, but I'm emotionally invested in that. Where it's like, okay, they're trying to save their home. They're trying to take all these, dead end jobs, and like they get fired from everyone. Like they're just not, able to, because like they've never worked a day in their life. I don't know what Farmer Jim, he might have taught them some good things, but he didn't teach them a work ethic because they know nothing. And there's this really funny joke. It's probably my favorite joke in the whole movie. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like it was cracking me up like 5 minutes later, where they're about to lose their home, and Porky's like there's only one thing we have left that we can do. And that's where he's gonna say look for jobs or whatever, but Bug says, or I mean Daffy says, we wait for a stimulus check. And it's just so out of left, like you don't expect that in like a zany cartoon about talking animals, but that was funny. That got a laugh out of me. I didn't see that one coming. And then of course Porky's like, no, we're gonna look for jobs, or whatever. But yeah, they get fired from all their jobs. Then finally, they get on at this gum factory, and the way that comes about is, they're eating at a diner, and that's where they meet Petunia Pig, who Porky immediately is smitten for, and that's kind of another pretty funny moment in the movie where it's like you know where they're going with the joke, but it was pretty good. They're at the diner, and so Petunia sits down like at a on a stool or whatever at the counter, and Porky and Daffy are seated at a table, like at a booth, and Porky's kind of staring at her, and then Daffy's like, oh, you want to get a piece of that, don't you? It's like there's a lot of innuendos in this movie. There's a lot of surprisingly kind of dirty jokes with Porky's interest in Petunia Pig. But he's like, yeah, I bet you'd like to sink your teeth into that, and then he's like, don't worry, buddy, I'll, I got this for you. And Daffy goes up there to the counter, and, he's like, my friend over there would like one of your, a slice of your cherry pie, because he thinks that he's talking about the pie and not, not Petunia. So it was kind of a predictable joke, but again, it was funny. I liked that. But then you had this moment later on where Porky says something. I forget how he says it. Like, because Petunia, she's experimenting. She's trying to create like the perfect gum flavor is kind of her mission, which is kind of a weird goal for that character. But that's kind of her whole thing. Is she's obsessed with creating this perfect gum flavor because she's tired of like these corporations and their rehashing of the same product over and over again. She's talking about like, this new gum flavor that's coming out is kind of the same as like an old flavor that came out like 6 months ago, but they're calling it a new name and pretending it's something new. And she refers to it as like a reboot, I think is what she says, like tired of all these reboots. And even though they're talking about gum, it's kind of clear that it's kind of a sort of a commentary on Hollywood and like the movie industry with all these like, Disney does all these live action remakes. So it's almost kind of like the movie is almost giving a middle finger to like, Warner Brothers and all these other companies out there. So that was kind of, that was kind of funny. But she has this line. She's like, needing people to like taste test for her perfect flavor. And Porky says something like, I forget exactly how he says it, but you can use my taste buds anytime or something. And then he's like, I didn't mean it like that, but it's yeah. So there's a lot of weird like innuendos in this movie, but it's pretty funny. I don't think any kids are gonna like get it, but me and my brother, as adults, we were kind of, wink, wink, nudge, nudging. It got a few laughs out of him, which kind of surprised me because my brother is not like super into animation really. But another moment where he laughed and I really enjoyed that too is where Daffy. So to kind of get more into the plot of the movie, the stakes kind of get a lot higher. Where there's like this whole thing with aliens and they're mind controlling people. Well, one alien specifically, and he puts this goo, this green ooze into the gum that's going to be mass distributed all over the world to brainwash everybody and essentially turn them into zombies to do his bidding. And so Daffy sees one of these people, and he's following because he's like something's not right with that guy. He realizes that there's this goo that's oozing out of his suitcase, which is the same goo that earlier, like at the very start of the movie, a UFO had like crashed into their home, and so that's part of the reason why that the homeowners association, stopped by and said that their house was didn't meet health and safety standards because there was like this gaping hole in their roof, and yeah, so with that hole there was like this green goop stuff there that Daffy found. So he puts two and two together and he's like, wait, is this goop leaking out of this guy's bag, this guy being somebody that was brainwashed by the goo himself and is now doing the aliens bidding. Daffy's like, is this somehow connected? So he's following this zombie guy who's just kind of like limping, just going goo, and he's got like one eye's pointing this way, one eye's pointing the other way. It's very very silly. It's very very derpy looking. It's very modern internet humor kind of thing. Where he looks so derpy. But so Daffy's following this suspicious guy, but there's this really funny moment that it was a nice visual gag that it got a chuckle out of my brother, and I thought it was really funny too. Where Daffy, he's following him with his eyes. The guy goes around a corner, and Daffy he's like hiding behind that corner, and his eyes come out and like go around the corner, and they're following behind him, kind of like Patrick does, on that episode where they're selling chocolate bars, and he's like focusing, and that guy slams the door on his eyes. It's kind of like that. Daffy's eyes shoot out, and they're going around the corner following this guy, and the guy, I guess, detects that he's being watched, so he turns around, and when he does, Daffy's eyes just go completely flaccid, and they like fall flat to the ground and out of that guy's line of sight, and so that was really funny. And as far as jokes that landed, even the joke, I didn't expect to find it funny because, again, it's so overdone. So many movies nowadays do stuff like that. But I think part of what made it funny is, one, it was so quick. It was like a 30-second gag and then we're moving on. We're not lingering on it. It's not the entire premise of the movie like in Ralph Breaks the Internet. But whenever they're looking for different jobs, and eventually Daffy's like, well, what if we become social media influencers? And Daffy starts like, Porky's recording Daffy on his phone while Daffy's like twerking in front of the camera. And usually stuff like that, it's just like it's so cringe. It's such like a low hanging fruit to make a joke like that. But it was funny because, again, it was short. But the other thing about it, I think, is just the way it was animated. Just the way Daffy shaking his butt was animated like so over the top, just so fluid with his butt just jiggling. It was genuinely really funny the way that they went about it. So kudos to the artists, to the animation team that really, because Daffy was throwing it back. But kudos to them for making that work. Like a lot of times, like fart jokes, for example, very low hanging fruit, like in children's movies, like just very low effort comedy that more often than not, I just like, if you're an adult watching it, it doesn't work. But a show like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, one of the funniest episodes, which I think is just called Duck, about this invisible duck that follows people and makes farting noises, and everybody thinks that person's farting because no one can see that ghost duck except for the person that's being haunted by it. So everyone else thinks that whoever's being haunted by it is just like a rude person farting everywhere, and that it's hysterical. It's one of the funniest episodes of Billy and Mandy. So kudos to whenever the writers and the animators are able to take something so benign and done to death and so basic as a fart joke, or in this case, a social media twerking in front of the camera joke, and making it actually funny. It's like a thing you've seen a million times, and usually you roll your eyes and groan about it. But me and my brother were both like cracking up at that scene. Like it was really funny. Um, but that's probably the majority of the jokes in the movie that I would say really resonated with me. And again, those were mostly in that first like 15-20 minutes after they do the whole weird Farmer Jim exposition. And then the movie's kind of just, in my personal opinion, kind of downhill from there. It's not bad, but the more they bring in the whole like alien taking over the world thing and like mind controlling people with gum, it just gets a little too over the top silly for me. Where it's like I prefer a more grounded, down to earth story. No pun intended. But the alien stuff just makes it a little too zany, a little bit too loony, if you will. So, because for me personally, and some of this might just come down to personal taste, but I never really grew up on like the classic, like Looney Tunes, like the Tex Avery and Chuck Jones, all that stuff. I've seen some of them, I watched some of them, years later. I'm not the biggest fan of like slapstick comedy, which is kind of how I would describe Looney Tunes. And especially if you try to stretch that out into like an hour and 20-minute movie or however long this movie is, I'm not exactly sure what the runtime was. Because, Looney Tunes, those those are shorts typically. They're not even really a full like 11-minute time slot. They're like maybe 5 or 6 minutes or something, and a lot of them were made, before a movie started. You'd watch in theaters before like the main movie, so they were short and pretty digestible. So again, I'm not super into the slapstick nature, but it's a lot easier to digest when it's only like a few minutes long. But personally, for me, what I loved, I grew up on the Looney Tunes show, which was kind of this sort of reboot series that does more of a sitcom format, which sounds really weird on paper. But I just thought it was really genius, where it's like Bugs and Daffy are essentially like living together, and they're living in this like modern, suburbia, and so like they, go to the mall, and like they, work regular, office jobs and stuff, and like it's just a very down to earth storyline. It's 22-minute episodes, and they all have a plot that follows a certain degree of logical, sometimes a certain degree of logic. Sometimes they can get, pretty silly and pretty zany, but it's never completely out of left field, and it never takes away from my suspension of disbelief that's very important as the audience to like, not get pulled out of the movie and just like, wait, now how could that happen? That doesn't make any sense. And some of that might come down to, I'm an English major, so I'm used to looking at pieces of fiction and, deeply analyzing them, looking for meaning. Where with some things it's like, well, it's a cartoon, don't look too deep into it. But I don't know, the Looney Tunes show, it was genuinely like really, really, really funny. And, the characters I thought were just so well done. And again, each episode has its own self-contained plot, but it's not, it's within this grounded universe. It's not like where Bugs Bunny, one episode he's a sheriff, and then in another episode he's, in the Arctic or something. It's like complete, or another episode he's, in ancient Rome, or like it's, every episode is kind of the same setting, in that they're in this modern suburbia, and the plot, it's often very mundane stuff, like, okay, we're going to the DMV this episode, or we're going to but it's done in a way that's just so funny, seeing these different Looney Tunes characters in these kind of mundane situations. It's like a sitcom. A lot of people say that it's almost like a Looney Tunes, animated version of like Seinfeld. I've never actually watched Seinfeld myself, so I don't know how accurate that is. But so that's kind of more my style of animation, a more grounded plot. So this movie, it's got a lot of silly stuff that's kind of all over the place. Where it's like these guys they get mind controlled with the gum, like all the people on Earth, and that's one of those things. It's like it's hard for me to just. It's like I got to remember, like it's don't overthink it. It's a cartoon, but it's like literally every single human being on Earth gets mind controlled by this gum, and because I'm the way that I am, I'm like okay, well like that's not very realistic. What about people in like third world countries? You mean even they got shipments of this gum, and every single person chewed this gum, and now every single person is brainwashed by this gum. There's not a single person that just, besides Petunia, who just doesn't like this gum and just like, nah, I don't think I want to try it. There's nobody that just saw someone else get brainwashed and they're like, okay, maybe I don't need to try this gum. Like they all try the gum and we're all completely oblivious. Not one person other than Porky and Petunia and Daffy caught on to the fact that it was mind controlling people. You'd think after like a couple billion people on Earth, the other like 6 billion would be like, wait a minute, maybe this is a problem. Maybe we shouldn't be chewing this gum. But like again, most people probably aren't going to watch it and think the way that I do. But that's just how I see it. And again, it's more classic Looney Tunes. It's kind of nonsensical. It's not supposed to make logical sense. But again, some of it that's just art's subjective. Different people are going to appeal to different things, or different things are going to appeal to different people, I should say. So I can't say that it's necessarily bad for that. It's just different from what I'm used to. It's not necessarily what I like, what I look for. If you grew up on classic Looney Tunes back in like the 60s or whenever, there's probably a lot here that you'll like. But for me, and then like the alien that's doing all this, you come to find out that their whole motivation is that they're not actually a bad guy, which is also kind of weird because it's like the whole time they've been like laughing maniacally and all the like very bad guy tropey stuff. So that again, that suspension of disbelief. I'm like, well, if you're not bad, why were you doing all that crap? But the reason that the alien was mind controlling people is because, and again, it's just very weird. It's a little too out there for me, but the end goal was for everyone to blow a giant bubble, and then those bubbles would merge together, all the bubbles of all the 8 billion people on the planet or whatever, and surround the Earth with one gigantic super bubble that would essentially act as a force field and shield the Earth from this comet that was going to crash into it. And the reason, like the alien's motivation for wanting to save the Earth is because he wanted, because he keeps saying throughout the movie, like wanting the Earth's, most precious natural resource, and it's like, oh, is it gold? Is it, is it oil? But no, it's boba tea, and like there's no setup to that. So when he says like that's all he wants to save the Earth and everybody in it because he wants to be able to drink his favorite tea. It's like it's supposed to be funny, but I'm just like, you couldn't have come up with a better motivation. Or if you're going to have it be boba, set it up earlier in the movie, have somebody talk about boba tea or something like 10 minutes in. But like boba tea was never referenced throughout the whole movie, so it just feels so random and out of left field, and it's just like, huh? So I don't know. There's a lot with this movie that doesn't make sense. But again, if you grew up with classic Looney Tunes, you're probably more accustomed to that. But I don't know. I was hoping for a more grounded, believable story. I mean, obviously you've got talking animals, you got stuff like that. That's, but again, stuff like that, you can accept that, like, okay, in this world, that sort of thing just exists. You have talking animals, you have humans that coexist. But there's other things where it's just like, I'm just having a hard time believing this within the confines of this world. So I don't know. If you don't have like an English major brain like me, this stuff might not bother you at all. I'm not sure. But so yeah, after the 20-minute point, probably pretty much the whole rest of the movie is like, aliens, aliens, aliens. We've got these really high stakes. And it also kind of the plot or the character development kind of slows down a lot at that point, because I kind of talked about this in my review of the Plankton movie, but I've found about myself, and this again may just come down to personal preferences, I really like dialogue. I like seeing characters interact with each other and growing and learning, and action sequences in movies serve their purpose, But if it's just action and not a lot of character building and not a lot of development going on, then I start to like lose focus. I start to lose interest. Um, and I feel like there's a lot of that after they really start leaning into the alien stuff, which again happens pretty early on in the movie. Um, I think I would have really preferred if we went at least through, like, at least halfway into the movie, before the alien stuff really starts, like, coming into play. But it's like they set it up so early that it feels like so much of the movie is action and like it's kind of a cool scene where it's like Porky and Petunia, they've got flamethrowers and they're like going around, they're like burning the gum, like one of them's like spraying this gas that's like nasty and causes people to throw up the gum, and then the other one's burning it with fire. I don't remember which one. Petunia's doing one thing and Porky's doing the other, and they've got this like music playing. I forget which song it is. It's some contemporary song, but it was good. It fit the mood of the movie. So it was kind of cool. But I just feel like there's too much of that in this movie where it's like I could really do with a lot less action and a lot more character building and frankly a lot more humor. Because the first, again, 15 or 20 minutes of the movie after the weird exposition with Farmer Jim is genuinely really, really funny. I got a lot of laughs out of me. But then after that, I feel like the movie just kind of stops being all that funny. There's some jokes like with the alien and his henchman with like the weird eyes pointing opposite ways, where it's like I feel like they try too hard. Some of the jokes feel a little bit like forced. Like there's this one thing where the his mindless you know human zombie sycophant or whatever like crashes and like breaks a bunch of like test tubes and beakers, and it's like he's off camera and you just hear him crashing into stuff for like 20 or 30 seconds, and the whole time the alien's just got this really annoyed look on his face, and he's kind of like doing this, like tapping his fingers on the desk, and it just keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going, and it's just like it wasn't really that funny. I didn't think like I knew what they were trying to go for, but it's just kind of like, okay, we're kind of milking this joke. Can we go on to something else? So I don't know, but the movie, it feels like it's trying too hard to be zany, trying too hard to be loony, and not. I feel like it doesn't take itself seriously as much as I would like. And again, it's Looney Tunes. Maybe you could argue it doesn't need to. But like even like again at the start with Farmer Jim, and there's other moments in this movie where it's like Daffy and Porky, they're having a heart to heart, and it's like they're crying, and it's like it's kind of this you would think would be a heartfelt moment, but it's like it's their crying is so over the top, and it's like their tears are just splurting all over the place, and it's like it's played for laughs, and it's like I'm currently taking a animation script writing class, and one of the things that we've talked about is like if you're writing a serious drama, it's important to have moments of levity, sprinkled throughout. Because if it's just the one tone the whole way through, that's kind of that can be kind of hard to swallow. And same thing if you're making a comedy, you kind of want to intersperse that with moments of seriousness, so it's not just all trying to be funny or silly or wacky 100% of the time. But this movie, I feel like, doesn't do that. It doesn't really achieve that balance, at least not in a way that's satisfying for me personally. I think the stuff with Farmer Jim at the start, could have been a lot more heartfelt. Like, I think it's stuff like, the opening, like, 10 minutes of Up, and it's like, well, not everything has to be as tearjerker of an intro for, as Up, because, I mean, yeah, this is, a kid's animated movie. But at the same time, I don't think we should be afraid like that kids can't handle serious stuff. So I don't know. I would have liked more serious moments in there. Some of the serious stuff that is in there feels a little bit forced. Like there's this part, it's kind of a little tropey. You see in a lot of movies where kind of in like the second act, I guess. Porky and Bugs have a bit of a falling out for a little while, and it just felt kind of there's parts of the movie where I get very frustrated at both Daffy and Porky. I get frustrated at Daffy because, like, there's this one part where they're making a they're making a plan, and they've got all this stuff on a chalkboard because Petunia, she's like really smart and a scientist, so they've got all these equations and stuff on the board of how they're gonna stop the alien onslaught or whatever. And Daffy, he just gets a big mallet and he just starts breaking it and sets it on fire. And then that laugh that he does and destroying everything. And Porky's like, Daffy, what are you doing? And so, as the audience watching that, I get really frustrated too. Like, why is Daffy doing that? Because it's like, yeah, he's zany, he's crazy off the wall sometimes, but like, you've also already established in the movie that he's not always like that. And in fact, a lot of the times he has a better understanding of what's going on than anybody else. He was the one who pieced together, like, Porky didn't believe him, nobody else believed him, that aliens were, infecting people's minds with this gum goop. So it's like, Daffy is pretty smart in a lot of ways. So then it's like, why is he, like, all of a sudden he's just, getting this mallet and destroy, like, I don't know. It just felt kind of out of left field. It felt forced, because then that's kind of what pushes Porky to, he kind of tells Petunia, he kind of does this whole thing. They need eggs, and it's kind of a funny moment. They need like rotten eggs to make this concoction, to make this like disgusting smell, that they can spray at people to make them throw up the gum, and then they can eliminate the gum, so that way they're not brainwashed anymore. And Porky like hides all the eggs and says that they're all out and that they need Daffy to lay more eggs, even though he's a male duck. So that's pretty funny. He's like, do you have any idea how difficult it is for a male duck to lay eggs? So that's kind of funny. He's, straining like he's trying to poop or something to squeeze out eggs. But he does that to kind of distract Daffy, to give him something to do so he won't interfere while him and Petunia are out trying to stop the aliens. And then, later on, Porky, confesses that to Daffy. But even then, it feels very forced, where then, like, Porky kind of just a complete jerk, and he's just, like, going off on Daffy about, like, yeah, I can't trust you with anything. You're so incompetent and useless, basically. Not quite in that harsh language, but, this is all your fault, and, like, I purposefully made you think that we, didn't have any eggs because I didn't want you getting in the way and ruining everything. And this, keep in mind, is when they're already captured at this point, and this is like, as far as they know, their last moments before they're killed by this, evil alien, or this alien that they think is evil. And Porky's just like, really just like digging into Daffy, and it's like, okay, yeah, like, it was frustrating to see Daffy, destroy the board with your plans and everything, but like, Porky, you're being you're being a real prick right now, Porky. Let's take it down a notch. So I don't know. So I found myself frustrated kind of with Daffy, but frankly more frustrated at Porky at that point, where he's just going on, because again, like, he's telling Daffy essentially like how useless he is and how he messes everything up. But again, like, I feel like that should have been resolved much earlier in the movie, because like, Porky had already underestimated Daffy, was mad at him and blamed him for getting them fired from their latest job and ruining his date with Petunia because, of this crazy alien conspiracy. But then he finds out Daffy was right all along. There really are aliens. So you'd think that would be enough for Porky to be like, okay, his methods are a little unorthodox, but maybe Daffy's not as stupid as I think he is. But no, he's just like laying into Daffy, and it's just like, I don't know. So that kind of that was kind of weird, but yeah, like I said, the movie a lot of time is just kind of action, because like they find out that the alien's actually nice and is trying to save the world. Again, like, why not just like communicate with the human, attention humans, there's this, like, get all the smartest minds at NASA, we need to devise this plan to stop this rock hurtling through space that's going to destroy your planet. Instead, he had to go the route of brainwashing everybody, which, again, it's a movie, it's Looney Tunes. I probably shouldn't be taking it this serious. People are probably going to make fun of me for picking it apart as much as I am, but it doesn't make sense. A lot of the movie just doesn't make sense, And But anyway, so they find out that the alien is, is nice and everything, and they work with the alien to devise a new plan for how they can go inside of the asteroid and essentially blow it up before it even gets to Earth. So that's what they do, and kind of the way that they're able to stop it is kind of clever. They kind of bring in something they introduced earlier in the movie with like these like chattering teeth and stuff to like make this sort of this antidote. Well, not really so much an antidote, but so kind of early on they established that Petunia, she's trying to make this perfect gum flavor, but things keep going awry and it literally explodes. Like it'll literally blow up in your face. Daffy chews a piece of it and just his beak falls off or something. And so then they kind of bring that, and I kind of figured when they introduced that her gum exploded that it's like, okay, that's going to come back into play somehow. They're going to need explosives, and so yeah, her gum is explosive. So they get a whole bunch of that stuff. They take it inside to like the core, the center of the asteroid, and they've got these like chattering teeth that was used much earlier on in the movie to chew it. That way it can blow up, to blow up the asteroid, and then things go awry and they have to switch to a plan B. But the plan A, it was kind of clever how they brought back in some stuff that was established earlier in the movie. That's good, setting up stuff and then kind of, doling it out. That's another thing we've been learning in this class that I'm taking about doling, kind of like foreshadowing. You set stuff up and then, kind of comes into fruition more later as it goes on. But then when plan A fails, they have to switch to plan B where, Porky essentially learns to trust Daffy and just let him just be as loony as possible. That's kind of part of the message is kind of just that it's okay to just be loony sometimes. And so that's where I kind of feel a little bit bad that that's kind of what I don't like about the movie is when it's trying too hard to be loony. But I don't know. But yeah, so Daffy, he ends up he's got his hammer. He does his and destroys everything. The same thing that got him into that mess earlier when he ruined the plan. Now he's using it to blow up the asteroid and save the world. But then Daffy, they're having to get out of there because it's like there's a countdown. It's like we've only got like 10 seconds to detonation or whatever. So they're making their way to the exit, and then Porky gets entangled in the goo. He can't get out of there, and Daffy. Or no, actually, sorry, Daffy gets stuck in the goo, and then Porky, he turned around. He was running to the alien ship to get out of there, but he turns around. He wraps his arms around Daffy. He's like, no, I'm going to stay with you. If we die, we're going to die together. And it's kind of an emotional moment a little bit. That's probably the only time that it actually felt serious and not like they were just playing it for laughs, trying to make light of the serious situation. And then the asteroid, explodes, and Petunia, everyone on Earth is rejoicing because now they're safe. But Petunia's crying because like she thinks that they're both dead. But then, lo and behold, a piece of meteorite crashes toward Earth, and it's Daffy and Porky, and they're inexplicably okay. It felt very, like a Deus Ex Machina to me, so I wasn't particularly satisfied with that resolution. Like they're fine. We don't really have a good reason. They just happen to be this particular piece of rock that they were stuck to didn't blow up along with the rest of the asteroid, so they're fine, And then, at the end of the movie, they end up basically becoming millionaires because they get, and that's kind of weird. Again, they bring back Farmer Jim, and it's like his, I guess, ghost, I don't know, from heaven watching over them starts talking to him from the clouds, and he's like, I left you boys a little something. And he's like, that picture of me that you've been holding on to is like, take it out of the frame. And they take it out, and on the bag is like, an insurance policy on the house worth, $10 million or however much it was. So even though their house is destroyed, they are able to rebuild it, bigger and better than ever. And it's kind of so you've got the happy ending and everything. But yeah, so this movie, it was weird. It was a bit of an acid trip at times. Again, I would have much preferred it if more of the movie was like that first 20 minutes. If, they still could have done the whole premise of like, we're about to be evicted from the only house we know and we got to find a job, we got to find a way to earn money. But done it in a way where the stakes didn't get so high as like aliens are destroying the world. I feel like at that point the movie starts to kind of lose focus. And again, that happens pretty early on in the movie. And it's all just kind of action and crazy antics and whatever. And it just really, it pulled me out of it where it's like I'm not really, it's hard for me to stay invested in this. So I don't know. So it was good. I liked it. I wouldn't say I loved it. It was just it had way too much randomness in there that didn't make a whole lot of sense for me. And some of it just comes down to who you are, what you like. But animation wise, I thought the animation looked very good. Not anything groundbreaking. I think they could have done more, especially with it being the first 2D animated movie to get a theatrical release more or less in like 15 years. But it doesn't. But that's okay. It looks pretty on par with like the movies that were coming out back then. I imagine with where technology's evolved, we could probably make 2D animated movies look even better. But they probably didn't have a bajillion-dollar budget, and God knows they sure didn't have a marketing budget. So with what they had, I thought the movie looked very good. I thought the animation was very fluid, very well done, with the exception of like Farmer Jim, where for whatever reason they make him almost like he's like a, what was that old like 50s cartoon where it's like they're only animated where like their mouth moves, you know what I'm talking about? And it's like really weird and off-putting, almost like the Annoying Orange or something where it's like a real human pair of lips. They didn't quite go that far with Farmer Jim, but that's kind of what they were getting at, Very like Adult Swim-esque, like weird, just very jarring, departure from the rest of the art style for him. That was just kind of weird. But other than that, the movie looked really nice. The lighting and shading, the colors were very vibrant. I really liked I liked the aliens design. I thought Porky and Daffy's designs were very good, very evocative of the old classic Looney Tunes from back in the day. So there's a modern sprinkling in there, like with stuff like everybody having cell phones and things like that, which I think they maybe could have done without, but I didn't ruin the movie or anything. But stuff like that aside, it does feel in a lot of ways very classic Warner Brothers, era stuff. So I can imagine that for a lot of people that grew up on that, they probably will like it quite a bit. I feel like some boomers might be kind of off put by the randomness, but my brother, he's about 7 years older than me. He was born in the early '90s, and he enjoyed the movie, even though he wasn't as big of an animation buff as I am. He could appreciate it for what it was. I know he said that it felt very classic, it felt traditional, it kind of evoked a lot of the cartoons that he watched growing up as a kid, like Animaniacs and like Freakazoid and stuff like that. I think were two of the ones he specifically mentioned. So it definitely, the movie, it has its strengths. I really appreciated, honestly, that like I'm not really sure who voiced Porky and Daffy. They do a fine job. It sounds like you'd expect Porky Pig and Daffy Duck to sound. But I really appreciate the boldness that they didn't get some like big name actors. They could have easily had like Daffy is going to be played by Chris Pratt, and we're going to get Jack Black to play Porky, and Petunia Pig will be played by Zendaya, and we'll get like the evil alien that's actually good. We'll make him voiced by The Rock. I'm actually not sure if that alien was a boy or a girl. Its voice was a little bit ambiguous, so I'm not sure. Maybe the aliens, maybe it doesn't have a gender. I don't know. Maybe they reproduce asexually and it's got both organs. I'm not sure, but yeah, I like that it wasn't like a super, like I think even on the posters for the movie, it's like Daffy Duck and Porky Pig in, so it's not like they're really putting this big emphasis. Oh, look at these big celebrity names. I'm not sure if there was a single celebrity in this. I think I recognized some like voice actors. Like I think Carlos Alazraqui's voice might have been in there, who did like Mr. Crocker on The Fairly Odd Parents, and Rocco on Rocco's Modern Life and stuff. I got to meet him at a con a while back. Really cool guy. Not sure. There could have been Great Alau's voice in there, who does like Azula and like Vicky from Fairly Odd Parents, Manny from Billy and Mandy, and a billion other things. Maybe not. I'm not sure, but it was like actually people with a history of voice acting, and not like this A-list celebrity that's like in everything that has like a net worth of like 100 bajillion dollars. I really appreciate that they didn't go that route. I appreciate, again, that they made it, 2D, traditionally animated. This movie does a lot of bold things like that that's really just antithetical to everything that modern Hollywood is doing. So even though I didn't love this movie, I didn't love the plot. I think some of the character development could have been better. I thought some things were too silly, were too random. I really appreciate this movie. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad I went to see it. And I'm really disheartened that it doesn't seem like the movie's performing that well. So if you watch this video, if you haven't already seen it, I hope you will go out and see it while it's still in theaters, because I really want this movie to be a box office success. I really want to be able to send a message to Hollywood where these executives can understand that people enjoy these kinds of movies, that they don't have to bring in. Because back before, like, the 90s, I think one of the first ones was, like, Disney with, like, Robin Williams, where in the marketing they made this huge deal. Oh, we got Robin Williams to voice the genie in Aladdin. Which is that, from what I understand, he never wanted that and was very upset that Disney did that. But then, from there, then it just kind of got worse and worse with, like, the Shrek movie, and then it's like every character, you got Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy, like everybody's, Cameron Diaz, everybody's like this big, huge actor, which, I think it worked for Shrek. But then ever since then, it's like every movie has to have these huge stars, whether they're right for the role or not, Like Chris Pratt, I just don't think was a good fit for Mario in the Mario movie, for example. But, we have kind of seen some pushback against Hollywood, and in some ways they've taken notice, like with the Sonic the Hedgehog. Obviously, with the first movie, they did that whole redesign of that gosh awful Sonic design. But then also, like, Tails having, Tails' original voice actor, and not, getting some A-list star to play Tails. It was really important to a lot of people that Tails sounded like Tails, and they actually listened and delivered on that front. So, I want to see that become more of the norm. So, I don't know. So I really hope that this movie ends up doing well. There was a movie a while back, I forget what it was. I think it might have been a Disney movie, where it's like early on, it looked like it was going to be a box office flop, but then it like picked up in like the second and third week and stuff, and ended up doing like gangbusters. I forget what animated movie that was. Let me know down in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. Actually, it might have been Inside Out 2, maybe? Something. I forget what it was. But whatever it was not doing well at the box office. Then all of a sudden it just shot up. So maybe this movie will be like that. I don't know. But I really want it to do well, because I don't want this to be the last 2D animated movie that we get in like 15 years, But for what it was, the movie was good. Again, I wasn't blown away by it. I thought it was all right. Things could have been better. Something else that I do appreciate about the movie, though, again, just as far as bold things that were, I think, kind of a risk, but I really appreciate the movie for having the guts to do it. In addition to having the 2D art style, and not having like this prominent like big name voice cast. But the third thing is that Porky, Daffy, and Petunia Pig, they're like the only Looney Tunes characters in this. Like, everybody else is like a human, and then you've got like the alien. But yeah, it's their movie. Like, I thought for sure, like, oh, they're gonna have like Bugs Bunny's gonna have like a cameo in there, because when you think about like the face of Looney Tunes, like, it's Bugs, right? I mean, like, Daffy might be like second, but Bugs is first. You think about Looney Tunes, you think of, what's up, Doc? He's nowhere to be seen in this movie. Maybe someone with a more keen eye might have picked up on some Easter eggs or something that I didn't notice. You've got this alien attacking Earth, which is like, the alien is an original character to the movie. But I thought for sure, like, Marvin the Martian's going to be there in some way. There's no Marvin. There's no no Taz, no Speedy Gonzalez, no no Lola Bunny, no Sylvester or Tweety or Granny. So that really shocked me because like Daffy, he's like the second most important Looney Tunes character. Porky, I'm not sure if he's third or if he's even fourth or fifth. I can think of a lot of other ones that's like at least as important, if not more so. I guess he's pretty important that he's on the end title card. It says that's all, folks. So that might give him an edge over some of the others, but yeah, this is really a Porky and Daffy movie through and through. But I can appreciate that. Part of me was kind of wanting to see a cameo from Bugs or maybe Marvin the Martian come into the plot, but I really respect it. They were just like, no, this isn't a Looney Tunes movie with everybody, like Space Jam or something. This is specifically a Daffy and Porky movie, and I think that's kind of cool. So yeah, I respect this movie. I appreciate it, even if it's not, not exactly everything I wanted to see. I knew from the previews kind of what I was getting into. Like, it looked very zany and over the top with some of the alien stuff. I was like, I don't know about this. It kind of lived up to what I was thinking going in. It wasn't a terrible movie by any means. It was good. It didn't knock my socks off. And I would say, talking to my brother about it afterward too, I was like, yeah, I was kind of taken out by it when they really went, whole hog. No offense to Porky, with the alien stuff, and it was kind of like, yeah, that's when I stopped paying attention and kind of started scrolling on my phone because it just got a little too, crazy. I know that's not really good movie theater etiquette to pull out your phone and start scrolling through social media. But yeah, my brother was doing that for probably the majority of the movie after that first like 20 minutes. But again, it was us and like one other family in the whole cinema, and they were like sitting down toward the front. We were in the main back, so like the light from my phone screen, like, it wouldn't have disturbed them. So yeah, he was on his phone most of the time. But he still enjoyed what he watched of it. But he's not a big animation buff like me. It's kind of like, yeah, I've only got so much attention span for these kinds of movies. But he thought some of the humor was pretty good. There was elements of it that he definitely liked and that reminded him of his childhood. So if I were to give the movie a rating, I'd probably give it a review score. I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10, maybe 7.5 out of 10. But yeah, it definitely, it's not one of the best animated movies that I've ever seen, to be honest. And again, my opinion, it's my opinion, and a lot of it's subjective, because again, I didn't grow up on the old classic Looney Tunes shorts, so that kind of more slapstick humor where it's really not so much about the plot being driven forward as it is about all these moments of slapstick just doesn't do it for me the way having a more concrete plot with character growth and development and world building and stuff like that goes. So it was all right for what it was. I can't say for sure going into this movie if you're going to love it, if you're going to not like it that much. I haven't looked too much at the general consensus. I feel like people are probably more positive on it than negative if I had to guess. But I don't know that for sure. So hopefully I've not stepped on anybody's toes. Nobody's upset at me for my opinion. If you love the movie, more power to you. I think that's great. And I'm not trying to tell you that you're wrong for loving it. There's some things where I'm just like, this is like objectively just not a good movie, or this is overrated. I don't understand why people like it, whatever. This is one where it's like, if you like it, I understand why. I get it. It's just, it's not for me, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. There's some movies, there's some games, like Majora's Mask is a good example of a video game where it's like, I'm not the biggest fan of this game, but I can appreciate it. I get why other people like it. I get why somebody would say this is one of, if not the best game they ever played. I don't agree with that. That game stresses me out. But if you really like it, I get it. I understand. I don't think that you have bad taste. It just, we have different tastes. So, yeah, 7.5 out of 10. That's my take on the Looney Tunes movie. I'm looking to see here if there was anything else that I wanted to touch on. I took a few notes. I've really not referenced these notes at all. Yeah, I think I pretty well hit on everything. Um, so yeah. Last thing, I guess, I kind of touched on this. One of the last bullet points I wrote down here was movie felt afraid to get too serious. I kind of touched on that. That even the serious moments, I feel like they tried too hard to make it funny. So that's one way where the movie it feels daring in a lot of ways, but that felt like something where they were maybe playing it safe. So I feel like I would have liked to have seen them a little bit more bold in that direction. Be like, yeah, we can have kind of a heavy hitting moment like that. The Plankton movie, genuinely, there's parts of that movie. Watch my review on that if you haven't already. There's parts of that where I'm just like, wow, that is like shockingly deep. Like that's kind of sad. That kind of hits me in the feels. That's like there's some character growth of like from Plankton where I'm just like I didn't expect that. Um, but the character development in this movie, not only was it shallow, but it was also very predictable. It's stuff that I've seen before in a lot of other movies. Very predictable tropes. But it wasn't bad. But I would have liked to have seen more from it. But I do hope everyone will go out and see this movie because I want to get more traditional 2D animated movies like this in the future, and also ones that don't necessarily have to bring in all these A-list celebrities. But I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point. I've said everything that there is to be said about this movie. I think, and this review's almost an hour and 10 minutes, so probably almost as long as the runtime of the movie. So I am going to shut up. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. We'll probably do more movie discussions like this on the channel, maybe some TV show discussions. This is primarily a gaming channel, first and foremost, but, animation is another huge hobby of mine, so we'll be talking about that stuff here too. But yeah, I think that's going to be a wrap, so I will catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.